Sometimes the thoughts inside your head feel guilty on the inside.
Divine Source, Great Spirit, we come this day ready to receive. We ask that you guide our minds and our hearts for one and for all. And so it is.
Welcome to Talking Spirit. My name is Jutta, and I'm back with my lovely friend Elisabeth.
Greetings, everyone.
You know, it's an interesting experience that I was going through this morning and just, in our joining, how it all came together. But yeah, I was just having all of these things showing up that were seemingly making me very irritated this morning. Sitting down with the spirit, trying to get some guidance. I'm getting irritated because it's just not coming. And just joining with Elisabeth before recording, we talked a little bit about attack thoughts. And, as we sort of progress on our spiritual journeys and seemingly start to hold more light, it can seem like we pick up on all of this darkness in the mind, and it's like we become channels for the darkness sort of working itself out. It was an interesting experience for me today because I didn't feel like doing anything about it. It just kept sort of doing its thing in my mind. And in just talking about it with Elisabeth, it just all started lining up. And then I remembered, even as I was sitting and trying to get clear on our theme for today, and nothing was working. And I just said, okay, screw this. And I closed my eyes and I saw this bouquet of flowers in my mind and got a feeling that, everything that I was going through this morning was going to be part of the theme for today. So, we are always in this deep prayer to be truly helpful and just be clear channels. So thanks for joining us. And I'm going to send it over to you, Elisabeth.
I'm really grateful for this collaboration. It's such a place of grace for me. We are always in a dance of reflecting for one another what's in our minds, but also what's being called forth for the healing. And Jutta and I know that everything that we're experiencing is for the benefit and healing of the one mind. I just had flash on a memory that as a kid, there was just so much darkness being brought to the surface in my day-to-day life. And I had a cousin who would sometimes take me to school, drive me to school, particularly after a night where there was just a lot of really heavy stuff happening. And she would often take me to a convenience store and give me a couple of quarters to go buy candy. And I remember sitting there in the car where I was just absolutely devastated. And I remember saying to her, I know one day this will be helpful. That was well beyond my years, but that was the spirit in my mind and in my heart, making it clear that it was not going to be for naught that I was having these experiences, that there would be stories that would uplift others one day. We're here to forgive these dark, dark thoughts and experiences and beliefs and attitudes and opinions. The illusion of separation is very, very seductive to the mind. The mind has been playing games of separation for eons. And so there's a lot of healing that's required. And it seems like a bottomless pit. I spent many years of my journey shoveling the crap out of my mind daily. We all have different ways that we're supposed to operate and different ways that we are meant to serve our purpose. For me, one of the major ways has been clearing out and really purifying darkness. I remember when I went and did this, the Peruvian shamanism I've referenced many times, they talked about sorcery. And I remember that really rattled my cage. I knew there was going to be a lot of healing for me by going and doing this training. But, the idea of magic and sorcery and doing not nice things to others, that was really pretty frightening at that time to me. They pretty well immediately said most of the sorcery that is done is self-sorcery. There's the element within A Course in Miracles that talks about attack thoughts and that we have to give up our attack thoughts if we want to be in our right mind. And so most of the darkness that we are weeding through is darkness that has been projected out and lands back in our own universe. But then as we go on our spiritual journey, in swimming more in our oneness, we seem to be invited into a sensitivity, you might say, where we pick up more and more information. We purify our own experience to the point where then the one mind's darkness just shows up. And we have a job to do, which is to not take it personally, to not see it as real and true, and to work on just letting it go with the spirit.
When we talk about attack thoughts, there's so many ways of looking at that idea. And when I first got on my spiritual path, it seemed like attack thoughts were just going out of my mind and onto anything and everything. As I started kind of progressing and learning and experiencing that, okay, the world's in my mind, which means all the people are in my mind. And so whatever it is I'm kind of wanting to throw at them in terms of attack thoughts is something that's already in my own mind. And the most helpful thing to do is actually to take it back and look at it with the spirit. That's a really great sort of habit to get into. And then it seems like we kind of come to these other places where we actually need to ask ourselves, okay, is this mine? It was interesting too, like there was another recording we did, and that day I was having this cough, and it was a really, really out of pattern kind of cough for me, and it didn't actually feel like mine, which was really interesting because it's still something that, I'm getting used to, kind of experience stuff that's just sort of in the mind, and my mind's kind of picking up on it, but it really felt like, okay, this actually isn't mine, just doing my own forgiveness work with it. But it does seem, because of the purpose in our minds for healing of the mind, not my mind, but the mind, it just seems like sometimes things move through. There's one mind, right? And it seems like it's split up into all these different pieces via all these different bodies. And we're on our way toward remembering that we're still at home and whole and complete. And anything that's in the way of that, not even on a personal level, but on a level of the whole mind. These things can come up for us. And sometimes when they come up, it makes no sense. So yeah, it's a prayer walk, right? When this kind of stuff comes up in the mind, I sort of just let it be and let it do its thing. And, in coming together with Elisabeth, it's kind of just, it became clear that this is what happens sometimes. I even wrote to her a little email, what was happening and how I was just feeling really annoyed and frustrated. And what did you say? You said something like, oh, this is good. Healing's on the doorstep, right? It's like, oh, great. It's just, it's nice to have connections that can reflect back the lightness of what's happening. Because there is, that seduction word, there is a true seduction to really dig your heels in when stuff like that comes up and just eat it all up, so to speak. There's a lot happening in the world that is seemingly disruptive to the mind at the moment. There's a lot of distraction and a lot of darkness working itself out. What's our part in it? How am I to deal with this? And should I pay any attention to it at all? These are the kind of questions that I always sit with. But today was one of those days where my mind kind of caught it and worked it out. Healing's always happening, right? So I'm really grateful for that.
I think it's great that you landed the question, the disruptor in the mind, the question coming in of, is this mine? That was a tool that showed up in my life years ago, questioning, who's this belong to? As if there's a separate someone that it could belong to. But, as somebody that seems to be pretty plugged in, to other people's experiences, mentally, emotionally, telepathically, it can be confusing navigating this journey. And for me, that was a tool that really saved my mind a lot of suffering. We seem to go on this journey of believing ourselves to be an individual entity, and then going more into the vastness and the oneness from the personal to the impersonal. It's quite a doozy. The foundation is based on the idea that it's me, I, my. So as we are on those early parts of our journey, everything seems like it's ours. Everything. The purification process, for me is very much about realizing, oh my gosh, there's no me here having these experiences. This is the one mind. And that's a nuance that we're not talking about disassociating. That's just part of the journey that we go through, that the spirit takes us through to help us be divested from thinking ourselves as being all these things with all these mental states. I just saw this movie called Mental. In the beginning stages of it is a household of women and their mother as the main presenting characters. And they all are recounting all their mental illnesses that they're imagining for themselves. And they're very attached to the idea that they've got schizophrenia or bipolar or this or that. And I was just, really seeing that the expression of the media and social media, and now how a 12-year-old can talk about having struggles mentally and emotionally in a way that I wasn't able to when I was, 12. And that's wonderful on one level. And on another level, it's fed this belief in this personal experience. Really, what these kids are tapping into that I'm referencing is the one mind, trying to work this stuff out. Darkness in the mind, it's not personal. How can we hold it lightly so that we are not creating personas, that we're not creating more separate identities? How do we not keep generating more and more stories about ourselves and go, as you said, to just taking an experience of a mental or an emotional state that doesn't feel peaceful and taking it back into our own mind? Got millions of storylines and millions of archetypal energetics that we're trying to work out. People love to talk about the narcissist nowadays. That's like a rampant energetic. And instead of blaming everyone and everything for being that energy, how do we just say, okay, I'm going to take a look at my own mind relative to this? That's the only place for healing. Ultimately, we can work with that energy, and then we can get to a point where we can say, yeah, that energy seems to exist in the mind, and I'm no longer playing in it. I'm no longer invested in those ways of being. And if it shows up in my mind, I'm going to notice it now. I'm going to notice that seductive quality of the narcissist. I'm going to notice if it shows up in my own mind because I sat with it. I sat with the awareness of how it operates, and I forgave it in myself. We want to keep projecting that it's somebody else. It's someone else is the racist. Someone else is the narcissist. Someone else is the thief. We looked at some of that this morning and just chewed it over with the spirit and let the spirit come in to show us what to do with it. It was the bouquet of flowers that you got this morning relative to this. This is your contribution today to be made. It's great. So we can just live like that all the time and not personalize it. Be elevated in how we experience the energy that's showing up on our doorstep.
Yeah, it's really easy to take the stuff that's coming up and sort of, wanting to integrate it into a personality. I love that you brought that up because it does feel like it's a time right now where the mind really, really likes to make certain words part of its identity, and everybody needs to have some kind of label at the moment. Everyone has some kind of mental illness, whether it's ADHD or it's autism. I'm not trying to negate anybody's actual diagnosis. There are many people that actually really want to get on the bandwagon and have their own word for their identity and personality at the moment. And it's a trap, and it's very limiting, actually. And it's also very divisive to the mind, and it just creates more separate parts. My personality has traits as well that I could label, and I just don't really have any interest in doing so because it doesn't really add any value to my experience. It's more like what you said, like there's an awareness of certain ways that I can operate, and there's always a way through those limitations, letting the spirit really work with it and letting the spirit use those personality traits. So having all of these further splitting up into all these different categories really isn't going to help us. I think the mind really is just calling for love, and holding on to some of these words and labels is a way to try and get that love. That love comes from our home and our source. In removing all of those specifics and labels, that's how we make room for love to come in. Transcending limitations is what this is all about. Transcending and transmuting anything that feels limiting in the mind. In a way, any label really can be said to be an attack. Our true nature has no labels. So any label we want to paste onto ourselves is an attack on our wholeness. Yeah, it's not really bringing us any joy to hold on to those things. when anything arises in the mind now, it's not a denial of it happening. It's really just, a prayer of not taking it on and holding onto it, making it more of a problem than it really is, which, today was really just something to move through. And that's how a lot of it really goes.
I had the same thought. Any label is an attack on our divinity. It's not saying it to be in judgment. I still do it. It's just the mind awakening to what it's doing. Oh, yeah, I can still have a thought about being a body or being a woman or being a certain age. All of those things take me from this limitless, vast, unlimited expression into something very small. I feel like that expression of our limitlessness is so frightening to the mind that it's just played these games of darkness to try to lock down that power and potency. It's come up with a lot of, I'd say, peculiar ways of trying to scare itself and keep itself hiding from the light. Like if that works for you, have at it. It does not work for me. All the scary images and all of the us against them and all that sort of stuff, it just doesn't add up. I'm grateful to be invited out of it. I'm also grateful to have just a lighter sense within my mind when the darkness does seem to come up. It's not as terrifying to take a look at it. And as you said, it's not as terrifying because I have other people going through it right beside me. So it just makes the load a lot lighter.
I love it too, because it seems like, when you're in a relationship, no two are ever going through the same things. And if one's going through something, usually the other one isn't. And it's really nice. I like how that usually works out in these dynamics. One of us usually has sort of the handle on things, and it seems like we can usually pick each other up and be the reflection of the helpfulness of it all.
We desperately need demonstrations. Real practical demonstrations of how to move through this stuff. I did not see that growing up. I had to work really, really hard within myself to find peace in my mind to source from. As you said, in those moments where I'm not able to hold the line, now very swiftly in comes a reflection of choose again. There's some higher order to what's happening, but choose again to get in alignment with it. I am so grateful that training is now pretty strong. Doesn't mean I don't work the muscle every day. Doesn't mean I've arrived. It just means that the light switch gets turned on a lot faster now. Surround yourself, if you want another way, with reflections of right-mindedness. You might not exactly know what that is all the time, but if your heart's in the right place, it will show up.
It's so supportive to the mind to have others around that can hold you when you want to fall, when there's a lot of darkness coming up in the mind and there is a lot of attack happening in the mind. Call on the ones that know what's going on truly, so they can really hold you in the right space and in the right frame of reference. Attack thoughts are not fun, but with gentleness, there's a bit more ease to let things work themselves out and move through. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.